Well, good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. If you've watched this program at all the past year, you've seen us working hard to keep up with all the change going on in the world. You don't have to look far, and whatever side of the equation you're on, you most likely have some opinions to share. Opinions on cutting government waste and letting you keep more of what you earn. Now it's a debate about tariffs and whether we should make other countries pay us at the same level we pay them for U.S. products. Or trying to find peace in Gaza and Ukraine, and getting Iran to stop trying to build nuclear weapons. The debate about the best way to stay healthy, whether to trust government officials, the drug makers, or our doctors with a dose of our own common sense mixed in. Plus abortion, the environment, green energy, education, the millions who are here illegally, and that's just to name a few. Well, Congress is having trouble keeping up, and so are leaders around the world. So if you're trying to digest the change and not just survive, but thrive as it happens, you're in good company. Change can be uncomfortable, but it can also lead to great things and opportunities. The key, of course, is whether you're basing it on truth. Without truth, very little good will happen. Well, we're fortunate tonight to have a guest who only deals in the truth. And he's written extensively on pluses and minuses of following a truthful path. Dr. George Barna, welcome to our show.
Alan, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
You know, if his name sounds familiar to you, it's likely that you've read his best-selling book, The Frog and the Kettle, some years ago. In it, Dr. Barna forecasts trends that help some of our most influential leaders figure out how to anticipate what was coming heading into the year 2000. Well, tonight he's with us to report on his latest research, report on cultural and faith trends that he sees for the year ahead. I'm excited to hear what you've got to say on this topic.
Well, things are always changing, and the people who tend to do best are those who anticipate what's coming. So the idea is always to be trying to stay current, stay aware of what's going on. You find that the people that have the greatest tangible success are the ones that are always trying to think in the future, not think in the past. And so it's important not only to have that sense of vision of who God made you to be, what He's called you to do, how He calls you to do it, but also to understand the cultural context in which He's placed us.
Well, let's begin with those cultural issues. You've highlighted 7. This program is the result of one of them. You forecast a continued loss of market share in the mainstream media and an increase in programs like this one. How much do you see Americans finding their way to the truth versus just burrowing in on their own favorite version of spin and partial fact-based stories?
Well, what our research is finding is that right now about 2 out of 3 Americans believe there's no such thing as absolute moral truth.
Wow.
That all truth is up to the individual and his or her circumstances. And most of our decisions that we make and that calls for some sense of what truth is tend to be based on our feelings, our emotions. And so that's a very unstable platform for decision making. And I think that's one of the reasons why, particularly in the last 20 years, as we've moved away from the sense that there is a body of absolute moral truth, such as the Bible, actually the Bible, that America has really had such dramatic struggles in its culture. The more that we say we become the arbiters of all truth every moment of every day, the more difficulties that we're going to face.
Well, moving to the next issue, you see a reimagining of the family, the result of decades worth of inclusive challenges that have pushed back on biblical family standards. Can you explain a bit more?
Yeah, what we're finding is that with the younger generations in America, who are the ones who are creating the families of the future, what they're feeling is that family needs to be redefined to meet their personal desires and felt needs. And so what that's looking like is fewer of them are getting married. More and more of them are becoming serial cohabitors, by which I mean rather than getting married, they find someone they feel they love today. They'll move in with them for a while, and when that feeling of love fades, they'll move back out and they'll look for their next relationship. In the meantime, they may have children, but probably not, because they don't think that children are important. They don't value life nearly as much as prior generations had. And so all of these kinds of things, along with even a shift in how they think about parenting. Outsourcing of parenting functions has become the norm, where if they do have children, they love their children, but what's happening is that they want experts to be raising their children. They feel that will give their kids a leg up on the competition. And so they hire teachers, they hire mentors, they hire coaches, they drop their kids off at church for the religious professionals to do their thing. And so they're always looking for people who will take on the challenges that traditionally have been ones that parents have taken on. And so that's also changing the way that families look and operate these days.
Well, fueled by the stay-at-home mandates during COVID, you see a continued deterioration of our public schools. And that's on top of the president's decision to abolish the federal education department. What's emerging in this arena?
Yeah, what we're finding is a lot of turmoil in that public education sector for a number of reasons. One of which is the shift in market share between public schools, which had more than 9 out of 10 students. It's got significantly less than that now, as many parents have chosen to put their children either in a private school, perhaps a Christian school. They've been growing significantly, but homeschooling has also been growing dramatically. At the same time that you have that market share shift, you've also got the difficulty that public schools are having of hiring more new teachers. Fewer people are being prepared for those kinds of jobs. And what that's done is caused public schools to be relaxing the requirements for the kinds of teachers that they want to hire. In many schools, what you find is they feel a greater need to have a warm body at the front of the classroom, to have a qualified body at the front of the classroom. And so that's also continuing to diminish the quality of the education that public school students are receiving. And then there are also safety issues in many of our public schools. So it's a very difficult time for public schools, but that has made it in turn a challenging time for parents to try to figure out on what do I base where I'm going to put my child. And so, yeah, the turmoil is facing everybody that's involved in public education.
Well, on higher education, you've documented parents and students rejecting the infusion of progressive-only ideas and the huge expense of traditional higher education, and the belief that trade schools and technology training centers will pick up the slack. Is that also because more parents and their students are looking for real work and less brainwashing?
Well, a lot of it has to do with the shift that's taking place and will continue to take place in the national economy. With many of President Trump's current policies, what you have is a shift of manufacturing jobs back to the United States. And therefore, different types of jobs are opening up. Ones that don't necessarily require a college education, particularly a liberal arts type of education. But what's happening is that more and more companies now are starting to look for people to handle those manufacturing jobs or technology openings that are occurring. So there's that kind of shift that's happening right now, which is what's bringing about a decline in the enrollments in colleges and universities around the country.
Well, let's take a short break here. I hope you can stay for another couple of segments, Dr. Barna.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, thanks.
Well, if you have a thought you'd like to share with us, go to our new easy to remember website, ajnow.com, and click on the button that says Submit a Question. In a moment, we'll have more of Dr. Barna's research as well as the trends in faith that he sees ahead. Well, we're back now with Dr. George Barna, who runs the Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University. You have two more trends that I'd like to hear about. The first is the increase in mental health issues. It apparently goes back to what I said in the intro, that we're drowning in so many tough new issues that it's hard to stay anchored. Can you explain a bit further?
Yeah, what we're finding is that more and more people are admitting that they're really struggling with anxiety, depression, fear, suicidal thoughts, all of these kinds of issues. It's been interesting, though, as we've dug deeper into trying to understand how those work and what's been most useful to people toward getting past those kind of issues. What we find is that often it's a worldview problem. It's not a physical or biological problem, and it's not even something that counseling necessarily will help. It's more of a spiritual issue where, because growing numbers of Americans have turned their back on God, they've rejected God, they've rejected the Bible, they've rejected scriptural truth, these kinds of issues, they've rejected Jesus Christ as a Savior. What has happened is that all of these kinds of anxieties and these depressing thoughts and the fearfulness about life has crept up and overwhelmed them. And yet some of our studies have shown that those people who have tried to deal with those kinds of issues by going back and re-examining some of their spiritual assumptions and beliefs and behaviors have found that when they recognize that they're not in control, God is, that they don't need to have the answer to everything. God has it, and he wants to provide it to them. That tends to allay many of the fears and anxieties that they've been wrestling with. So rather than prescription drugs or endless counseling sessions, they've been able to deal with those kinds of difficulties by challenging their own spiritual points of view.
You talk about reinventing senior life. That's an even bigger issue than before, given the number of baby boomers heading that way. Can you tell us a bit about what you see?
Yeah, what we find is that with a lot of baby boomers, much like that generation has done all throughout the course of its history, they're reinventing the senior life. And so what they're tending to do is to turn a lot of their hobbies into businesses. They're changing how it is that they're experiencing relationships. They're devoting more time to trying to add value to their community now that their time is different. Their allocation of time and energy is different than it's been in the past. They're helping to create new models of assisted living. They're influencing a lot of things very differently in our culture. And so they're paving a different path for the generations that are kind of going to come after them and who are going to live longer and hopefully healthier lives. So it's been interesting to watch boomers who came into their teens and their 20s saying, we're not going to accept the way that things have always been done. We're not going to embrace many of the traditions that our parents and grandparents have created for us. They've done the same thing throughout their 50, 60, 70, 80 years of life, and now they're even changing the end of their lives, and it's going to have dramatic long-term impacts.
Maybe they should all pick up the guitar like it seems you have.
Yeah, I figure maybe it's never too late, eh?
Well, let's move to a lane that I'm a bit more familiar with. It's the faith lane, and I'll read from your report. Americans will continue to move away from the biblical characterization of God and toward imagining a God they perceive to be more accepting and less demanding. What's happened?
Well, what we're seeing is that continuation of the evolution of people's worldview in America. Historically, most Americans had a biblical worldview. Today, that's not at all the case. And so we're in a situation right now where only 4% of Americans actually have a biblical worldview. What we're doing instead is we're deciding that God isn't in control. He's not the center of our lives or the universe or even creation. We are. And so instead what we're doing is we're saying, well, if there is any kind of supernatural being, we're going to create him in our image rather than believing that he created us in his image. We're in a situation in America right now where we're at the lowest point ever recorded in terms of the proportion of Americans who believe in the God of the Bible. Instead, what we're doing is we're saying, well, if there is a supernatural authority, we're going to ascribe different characteristics to that authority. We're going to shape that authority according to our needs because that's what's most important. And I think that's one of the reasons why America's struggled over the last few decades, as we've increasingly had adults and our young people embrace that mentality it's been to our detriment as a nation and as individuals.
Well, Dr. Barna, please sit tight for one more segment. There's some positive signs from the new generation. We'll be right back. We're back now with Dr. George Barna, and time for one more question. You also point to a more positive sign, Gen Z's spiritual interest and increasing sales of the Bible. What's that coming from, since it fights the previous narrative?
Well, it can be a little bit deceiving, because what's going on is it's a generation that really is looking for answers. They believe that their parents' generation, the millennials, really did not have it figured out. They believe that spirituality should play a key part in their life. And so they're trying to figure out what religious faiths and what philosophies of life are going to be most fruitful for them as they mature. They're not necessarily believing that Christianity is the answer, but they're open to that being the case. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to connect with that generation and help them figure out the answers they're looking for.
Well, Dr. Barna, thank you for your time, and please stay in touch as these things pan out across our year.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
In a moment, your wonderful emails. They're now even easier to send at our new website, ajnow.com. You're welcome to even send a comment about the new site. I'll be right back. Thank you for sending your emails. I always look forward to reading your perspectives and your ideas. K&T from Southeast Pennsylvania said, "Dear Pastor Allen, thank you for combining the wisdom of all your sermons from your teaching series, Angels, Demons, and You, to create your new book. It's a must read. This knowledge is needed to navigate the path ahead as we, the church, take America back from the enemy. Thank you for making the instruction so easily accessible. We pray Psalm 91 protection daily over you, Kathy, and your entire AJM team. And that gives us much more hope than despair." Well, I thank you for your prayers, and I will share the encouragement with the rest of the team. This program and our publications, that is very much a team effort from the whole crew here. Thank you. Minnie emailed, "Pastor, I looked at the Bible for principles on everything, and in regard to the war, I believe it's perfectly justifiable to expect there to be an end game to the war and for Ukraine's leadership to have some skin in the game, so to speak. When Joseph was appointed to foster resources during the Egyptian famine, it was an expectation that whoever wanted goods would have to bring payment. The payment was set at 1/5 and relevant to the need. Those seeking aid or food sold whatever they had that was of value, because they were trying to preserve their lives and the lives of those to come. Nothing was free, and certainly not without limits. Why is it unreasonable for this principle to apply in this situation?" Well, I think fundamentally we have almost totally lost sight of a biblical worldview. And if we could regain that, it would inform us with some much better ideas around fundamental concepts like work, debt, charity, how to help one another. If we'll bring back that biblical concept and just stop every person saying, "This is what I think," we'll get to a more stable place. Greg from Washington wrote, "Blessings from Eastern Washington, Pastor Allen. Just a thought, rather than simply do away with the IRS and the actual income tax in and of itself, I believe a more reasonable system would be to allow every taxpayer to specifically direct where they want his or her income taxes to go, such as defense, infrastructure, border security, space exploration, foreign aid. Each recipient would have its own administrator and its own accountability panel. Well, I sincerely doubt that there would be any willingly directed funds set for gender affirmation classes in Tibet." Well, I think you're right about the classes in Tibet, but so far we haven't seen much credible evidence of good administration or accountability either. We'll keep praying. We're in the process of building a community of trust here, and we'd love to have as many people as possible involved. So please tell a friend to watch the show. It's live at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Central, or anytime on YouTube. You have to go to ajnow.com for the latest episode, or to send a comment, or even purchase my new book, Angels, Demons, and You. Thank you for helping to share the word with others. Truth matters, and the hope will spread. I'm Alan Jackson. Thank you for watching and sending us your thoughts at ajnow.com. Have a nice evening.